Hi, I'm David Andolfatto with the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, and we're here at the 39th Annual Fall Policy Conference at the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. And we're very pleased to have Casey Mulligan of the University of Chicago here to talk to us today about the paper he presented, which is called The New Full-Time Employment Taxes, plural, taxes. So thanks for being here, Casey.
You're welcome.
Would you mind, why don't you tell us what the paper's about? What are the set of questions you're interested in addressing here?
Well, I'm looking at the health reform, Affordable Care Act as it's sometimes known.
Mm-hmm.
And it has a number of taxes in there, but I focus on the two ones that turn out to be the biggest and I think often the most underestimated or even overlooked. The first would be the employer penalty, and that's levied on large employers who don't offer coverage for their employees, starting next year and really going into full force in 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second tax would be, it's an implicit tax, it's a benefit withheld from people because they are employed, and therefore their employer is offering them coverage. And that involves the withholding of some very generous assistance that came on with the law, but it's withheld typically from people when they work.
And large employers are defined as?
It's a complicated definition, but roughly speaking, we could say 50 employees and over.
Okay, so these are taxes that are implicit taxes, as you say, that are overlooked by economists, policymakers. I mean, people haven't been talking about them very much.
Well, the employer penalty has been given attention, but it's been well underestimated.
Underestimated, okay.
Because of its tax treatment, it's actually quite a bit more expensive than the $2,000 headline number.
Okay.
It's from a worker point of view, it's expensive because it's anti-competitive. It really discourages employers from having employees. Employees' wages are going to suffer from that more than you would think from a more typical tax of that size.
Okay, so let's go back to the size of the penalty, which many people say it's $2,000, the headline. And through your investigation, what do you find? I mean, to what extent has it been underestimated? Is it significant?
It's been underestimated in two ways. First of all, the number of workers that are really affected by it.
Okay.
A lot of estimates, it's around 10, 15%. I say it's more like a quarter. And the reason is this anti-competitive aspect to it, that employers are discouraged from becoming large.
Okay.
And that hurts even employees who work for a small company because their employer no longer has to compete so hard for employees, or not willing to compete so hard for employees. So that would be the one way it's underestimated. And then the tax treatment, because salaries are a deductible expense, penalties aren't. Employers really have to cut salaries by over $3,000 in order to have that $2,000 to pay the penalty. Also, it's not a $2,000 penalty, it's indexed to health costs, and health costs have already gone up. So that's going to creep up on us as well. And
I think I heard you mention earlier that the penalties, these are averages that you're reporting to me right now, but that there's quite a bit of heterogeneity that's going to impact differently depending on which demographic group, or is that correct?
Yeah, it varies across people for a number of reasons. Their employer tax situation, some people don't work for a for-profit employer, or their employer may have a different rate depending on the state they work in. Mm-hmm. That's a source. If you think of the penalty in terms of the number of hours that somebody has to work to create the value to justify the penalty, that varies. So some workers need to work a lot of hours to create a little bit of value, and other workers create a lot of value in a short amount of time. So that's another major difference.
Do you actually try to quantify
right.
those? So what do you find? How do you do it, and what do you find?
Well, I look at the amount of the penalty, making these adjustments for taxes that I mentioned, and then I ask the question, worker by worker, how many hours do you have to work to create that kind of value? So a minimum wage worker, for example, would have to work a day every week of the year in order to create the value that would pay for that penalty that his employer is going to owe for him.
Okay, and that's a significant.
Yeah, and 1 day a week for the government on top of all the other days of the week we normally work for the government, so that's a lot.
So this paper is not one where you investigate the likely behavioral consequences of this distorted tax, implicit or otherwise, from this ACA, the Affordable Care Act. Do you intend to investigate it further, or do you have other work that
Yeah, I have a
tries to
book.
identify? You have a book.
I have a book that and the front part of the book kind of measures the taxes in many of the same ways that's in the paper,
Yeah.
and the second half of the book looks at the behavioral consequences.
Okay.
Uh,
So, is this, am I right? I mean, taxes, I mean, there's also presumably, I mean, so for example, currently even today, I mean, in the system that it existed before, I mean, you could argue there's quite a bit of cross-subsidization in that employees at full-time establishments that have pay higher premiums to cross-subsidize the uninsured. And presumably, I mean, that cross-subsidization will go down if it's replaced by this ACA. Is this something that makes sense? I mean, is this counted as part of the taxes? Are you measuring net taxes?
Well,
Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Now, the paper I had today doesn't
Yeah.
deal with those taxes. The paper I had today only deals with 2 of the big ones.
Okay.
And there are other ones that aren't as big, and some of them kind of go in the other direction.
Yeah.
Maybe you're alluding to some of those. The book, I cover them all.
Okay.
And there is an effect that we're hoping we're going to have, say, less uncompensated care,
Okay.
and that would have the effect of a kind of a tax cut.
Right.
But it's not that big. Uncompensated care in the nation is $50 billion a year or less. These taxes are getting up in the hundreds of billions, so
Oh, is that right?
they're a different order of magnitude. But you have to account for it. If you want to get an accurate answer, you need to account for that, and I do.
Okay. So you've written a book. I confess I haven't read it. I'm sorry, but you've studied the U.S. healthcare system, insurance system in detail. Do you make cross-country comparisons? And I guess in terms of policy, does your work suggest, from what you've discovered in your investigation, do you think that there are superior ways to deliver kind of the same product, or is the ACA really kind of messing up along some dimensions?
You know, it's not quite my expertise. Actually,
Okay.
the title of my book is adopted from Keynes. Keynes wrote The Economic Consequences of the Peace. I wrote The Economic Consequences of the Health Reform. And he and I had one thing we have in common.
Yeah.
We were saying, look, we have a document presented to us.
Yeah.
What is its impact? And we don't address it. Keynes called it the ideal question. What would have been a better document? I don't know. I don't got a better document. I got the document I have, and here are its effects.
I see.
People should address that, but first thing I think would be good to understand is the document we were given, what is it going to do to us?
Okay, so let's first understand what the likely effects are of the legislation as it's passed, and then subsequently we can debate the merits and the pitfalls.
Exactly, yeah.
And talk about alternative design. That's your view.
I took that off of Keynes's playbook, yeah.
Wow. Casey Mulligan, Keynesian. Thank you very much. So if you had let's summarize that in a nutshell. How would you, what's the takeaway of your research today?
I think in a Fed audience, they're interested in two numbers I come up with, that employment will be 3% less because of the law and all its taxes, especially the 2 that were emphasized in the paper, and GDP will be about 2% less. And both of these impacts will be forever or however long the law lasts. And most of that, again, comes from the 2 taxes in the paper that we talked about in the conference.
Okay, and these are measures of output loss, the costs. They don't necessarily measure the benefits of the extended insurance program, though. Or,
Definitely.
Or are you counting also the benefits?
Sometimes I allude to a scale, and there are costs and benefits, and I'm showing the labor market costs, the market economy costs, but there may be benefits that we're helping people, and we like helping people, and that's good. And somebody can weigh those costs, but
So
and benefits.
that would be the price of the benefits.
Now, to put it in those terms, I estimate that the productivity cost alone, not even counting the employment cost, is $6,000 per year per person who gets insurance because of the law. That doesn't even begin to pay the doctor to take care of them, okay, or the nurse. That seems like a high number to me that's maybe not justified, but again, that's not my expertise, and I'll leave that to others to decide.
Very good. Thank you very much, Casey.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
it.